Lately, you guys have probably noticed me putting a spotlight on Caroline DeFemme because she has been putting a spotlight actually on XRP. She has been one of the biggest XRP bulls in the last couple days. And I think that this is very interesting because, again, this is somebody that just left the CFTC as the acting chairman to, move over to MoonPay. And you wouldn't expect the previous CFTC acting chairman to be this bullish on XRP, constantly bull posting about XRP as well. I just find it very, very odd. Now, this post is how it's going, and she's quoting a post from Watcher Guru saying XRP flips BNB to become the third largest cryptocurrency in the world by market cap. And yes, it did happen. XRP started to jump in value. It was very exciting. But looking at this was not the only post, right? We have how it's going. This is to, build on top of how it started. So how it started, how it's going, how will this end? Well, I quoted this post from her with Brad Garlinghouse, and I said, crazy to follow Caroline's timeline since September of 2022 when she first met Brad Garlinghouse at Ripple HQ. That's, this image here, where she met Brad at the Ripple HQ. Full support of both Ripple and XRP since. I really think the odds of Ripple acquiring MoonPay are above 60% at this point, because I did talk about Ripple acquiring MoonPay recently. Now, a lot of you had questions, just like John Patrick did, and he said, what would be the benefit of Ripple acquiring a company like MoonPay? Well, here's the full breakdown. Well, they don't have an exchange yet in their infrastructure stack. And also remember, MoonPay provides the trusted infrastructure to onboard users into the blockchain-based financial ecosystem safely and seamlessly. With nearly 30 million customers empowering the infrastructure for nearly 500 companies across the decentralized economy, MoonPay is a key driver behind mainstream crypto adoption. It is fully licensed in the US and regulated in the UK, EU, Canada, and Australia, and has been certified for its enterprise-grade security. I think that Caroline is giving us hints at an acquisition between Ripple and MoonPay. And the main thing, right, is that we think about tokenized assets, right? If we go back, I want to say like maybe a year ago, it might have been even 2024. David Schwartz said that with tokenized assets, you still need a market behind it all. You need a market for tokenized assets. If we're thinking about an exchange could create that market. MoonPay has been a key driver of, essentially mass adoption. I don't want to say that like they are the mass adoption, player here, but they have been streamlining crypto on and off ramp services for quite some time. They have some of the biggest players already locked in. As you guys can see here, some of the names we have, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Venmo. There's so many big names here, and they streamline pretty much the entire service. It looks like Cash App for crypto. That's exactly what MoonPay essentially is. But they also have a full exchange within it, and they have 35 million plus verified accounts. They're trusted by millions of users across 180 plus countries. I mean, this would be the perfect acquisition for Ripple. And I would argue that they're most likely not going to be that expensive to acquire. I could be wrong on that, obviously, but I do think that this would be perfect for Ripple to acquire. And also, by the way, we know that MoonPay just acquired their New York Trust charter to expand regulated financial infrastructure within the US as well. So on top of that, we know that MoonPay has been making incredible strides to ensure that they are fully regulated, fully trusted as well. And I just think that with all of the connections back to MoonPay, with all of the hype from MoonPay as well regarding XRP, and then on top of that, we have MoonPay's new CLO and CAO talking about XRP and, meeting up with Brad Garlinghouse. She's talking about how it started, how it's going. I just wonder where this is going to end. And I do think that it ends with MoonPay getting acquired by Ripple. Now, on top of all of this, we did hear from Caroline recently, which I'll play a video clip from her here in a moment. But I go back to what we've been hearing quite often in the crypto space, which is this super cycle in 2026 driven by politics, driven by Fed easing and even institutional adoption. Now, the key here is institutional adoption. Even going back to what Ripple has been doing this entire, time, right? They have been fully locked in on institutional adoption, specifically institutional DeFi initiatives to drive adoption from institutional players. Tokenization has been a big key driver here as well. However, I'm mainly looking at 2026 being the institutional era. I posted on my account just recently. It might be a little bit older at this point, or no, it wasn't. It was actually right here. It was on the 3rd. I said 2026 is the institutional era of crypto. This has been a common theme in this market. 2026 being the institutional era of crypto. And it does make sense with increased regulations, potentially having full-on clarity for crypto this year, which I do suspect is most likely inevitable. I think even if we get it passed by the end of Q2, it's totally fine. But I do think that institutional adoption is going to heat up in a much larger way. Now, I bring this up because Caroline DeFam was on Taking Stock, and we have here why 2026 is the year of institutional adoption for crypto, tokenization, and blockchain, with even more choice and access to markets through trusted infrastructure partners like MoonPay that simplify compliance. And of course, yes, hyping up MoonPay, promoting MoonPay, doesn't matter, right? The main focus here is still 2026 being institutional adoption. Check this video out. It's a little bit longer. I'll speed it up slightly. However, it is about 5 minutes long, but listen closely to what is being discussed here because it's very important to look at, especially if we are thinking about what 2026 has in store for crypto.
Excited to have her. She is the Chief Legal Officer and Chief Administrative Officer at MoonPay. She joins us down here on the trading floor of the big board. Thank you for being here and a very happy new year to you.
Happy New Year. It's so great to be here.
Caroline, can we start first and foremost? What are you hoping to achieve in your new role with MoonPay?
Well, what's really exciting about starting at MoonPay is that MoonPay is the most trusted infrastructure partner. It's a global value network, and I think as we see increased institutional adoption in crypto and blockchain technology for 2026, it's going to be really key that you have those partners that understand how to scale responsibly and be compliant, especially with KYC, AML, and other important protections.
Do you have an outlook for increased institutional adoption for crypto in the new year?
Oh, yes, 100%. So institutions have been working on blockchain technology and tokenization and crypto as an asset class since at least 2017, sometimes even 2016. I started working on it in 2017, 2018 when I was at Citi. And so you've had the proofs of concept, you've had the pilots. All of these institutions, from the biggest banks to asset managers to exchanges and clearinghouses, have already been, for almost the last 10 years, working on tokenization and this technology. So now with regulatory clarity over the past year, from the White House Crypto Report, which laid out the U.S. policy roadmap, to my efforts at the CFTC when I was acting chairman with the Crypto Sprint, and the SEC Chairman Atkins' efforts with Project Crypto, you are now seeing that all come together this year for institutional adoption.
Caroline, what do you think will most separate crypto companies that scale versus those that may stall and have a little bit more difficulty scaling in this new look environment?
So it is always product market fit, but with crypto, as with any emerging area where there's risks and there's a lot of uncertainty, it is going to be those who understand how to be regulatory compliant, who don't fight this idea that you do need to have protections against illicit finance, and who know how to, again, be that trusted infrastructure partner to regulated institutions, to be that brand of safety and trust for consumers. That's what's really going to differentiate. So if you're able to understand how to adapt to this environment to ensure you have product market fit and you're safe with the right governance, controls, and compliance in place, that's the winning formula.
What does the right governance look like? What does strong governance look like for the space? Undoubtedly, 2025, a ton of new momentum was put into the space and rules of the road were changed. And everyone I've spoken to said a very favorable way, but I'd imagine strong governance is something you're probably the ultimate pro to talk about.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So what I think really differentiates it, right, is that people used to think that you needed to break everything and have completely new rules for crypto and for blockchain technology, and that's not true. I mean, we're here at the New York Stock Exchange. When we went from paper tickets, right, to electronic screens and now to digitalization and tokenization, we didn't throw all the rules out of the road, out of the window, right? We have just rules of the road that are clear by understanding how you take securities laws, for example, and apply it to tokenized securities instrument. It's just a different format from paper to electronic to now digital. So it's the same thing. If you are able to think about the existing rules, how to apply them to the new technology, not throwing it out of the window, but just understanding how to apply it, that's the difference. And that's exactly what the regulators did last year. What I did at the CFTC and what the SEC did was to show you how you could take the existing laws and rules, use innovation exemptions, and use more flexible interpretations to take the rules that work for securities exchanges and futures exchanges and apply it to crypto as an asset class. And most importantly, for tokenization and blockchain technology, that infrastructure, it doesn't change. The rules are technology neutral.
Sure. I was a Capitol Hill reporter at a time when members of Congress of both parties were really starting to learn what blockchain technology and cryptocurrency was. I think that conversation has really changed a lot. since when I started down there in 2017. I wonder from where you're situated, are there things policymakers may still slightly not understand or not quite get right about the crypto space?
Sure. I think this idea, again, thinking that crypto is breaking all the rules or that you need to start fresh, that's not true. You take what works, you use what works, and you scale from there. And so that's why, for example, with my Leverage Spot Crypto initiative, when I was acting chairman, we took crypto as an asset class and put that on futures exchanges. It's worked for 100 years. It's the same thing with securities exchanges, right? Those rules have the best for investor protection, for liquidity, for capital efficiency, and most importantly, for institutions. They're already plugged in. They have the policies and procedures, they have the governance, they have the compliance, and they have the risk management to use those established platforms. So I think 2026 not only being about institutional adoption, but it's about having choice. It's the choice to decide if you want to use your existing framework with state laws, or hopefully with market structure legislation, having a new unified federal regime, or using the existing regime. So you have the choice. You can use futures or securities exchanges. You could use potentially new platforms under the market structure legislation, or you can use your existing state platforms. It's about choice and access to markets.
Caroline, I wish I could continue with the interview. Unfortunately, I have to toss the brace. That's all the time we have. Happy New Year. Congratulations on.
And of course, those new platforms she's talking about is, of course, blockchain infrastructure. And again, what's crazy about this is, like, if Ripple does acquire MoonPay, right? Caroline has so much experience working with finance and financial institutional players. I feel like if Ripple did acquire MoonPay, their entire stack from top to bottom, from the ROUSD, from, Hidden Road becoming Ripple Prime, every single one of those acquisitions, like everything that Ripple is becoming, every single part of it from head to toe is fully compliant, fully regulated in a massive way that if I was an institutional player jumping into the space, wanting to tap into infrastructure, I would 100% be choosing Ripple every single time. It's not even me being biased. It's looking at things from a legal perspective, from a compliant perspective. Ripple is one of the few players in the space that is fully, compliant and regulated from top to bottom, state and federally, which is a big deal, especially going into 2026 with potential regulations being in place. Now, on top of that, every single big player, we're talking about Bitwise, we're talking about, every player is telling us that 2026 is going to have increased institutional adoption. With that in mind, right, we're looking at what this means for the entire space. If we're thinking about this logically, every single thing around crypto should also grow significantly. Because again, institutional players are not just going to, just jump into crypto and that's it. No, they're bringing capital with them. They're bringing users with them. This is where we really start to see, crypto wake up. And we think about the ETFs, right? We think about ETFs because the ETFs have been driven by institutional players and asset management companies. On top of that, we also think about tokenization. Tokenization is going to grow in a big way. Stablecoins are going to grow in a big way. Everything is going to grow in a big way, including even the value of these underlying assets. I think everyone is looking at institutional adoption and not really understanding the scale of this or the scope of how big this is going to be. And it's not just Caroline that's talking about institutional adoption. Like I said, it's, Bitwise CIO. It's every player from Bitwise essentially as well. And yeah, you might say Bitwise is biased because they are, an asset management company that have, ETF products. So they want to make sure that people are buying their ETF products. So they're going to talk in a bullish way. But even outside of asset management companies, regulators are even saying like increased institutional adoption going into 2026. Every single player saying institutional adoption is fully getting unlocked this year. And, I do believe it, especially if we're thinking about regulations. But the craziest part about all of this is I really do think that going into the institutional era of crypto, we also look at, some of the names that have been growing rapidly. Ripple is one of the core players here. Just thinking about ROUSD, it's crazy to see how fast ROUSD has been growing. But it's not a big surprise, especially when we think about how committed Ripple has been. Last year was a huge year for Ripple. They constantly were moving, constantly making big moves. 2026 is most likely going to be, just another big year for Ripple. And what's crazy about this is like everyone was complaining about ROUSD on the XRP ledger. Ethereum dropped 0.5% in the last 30 days, but XRP had an increase of 24, almost 25% in terms of ROUSD as well. So, we're starting to see XRP pick up in a big way, even around stablecoins, even from ROUSD, even tokenized assets as well. And with increased institutional adoption through Ripple products, if we're thinking about institutional adoption really picking up, I do think that Ripple products will probably see a major inflow into those. And of course, with XRP being at the center of all of it, I do think that XRP will also see a major inflow. I think that stablecoins are just going to continue to grow this year. I think that just in general, I think 2026 is going to be a big year even outside of like institutional adoption. I think everything, right? Like I think everything around crypto, everything that we talk about with crypto, it's just going to see an increased amount of growth. So I'm very excited about this. I think price action will also show up in a big way. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what happens this year. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video.